thanks so much for tuning in today for this podcast. It's called The Wave, and we try and answer the many questions and dialogue that we all have about these questions. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, I want to first say thank you for taking the time to send in questions. We literally probably take us maybe 6 months to get through the questions we have right now. So thank you for sending in those questions. Continue to send them in. Also share this podcast, however you're viewing it, with those in your circle of friends so they can join in the dialogue that Wade and I are having. My name is Abraham Wright. I forgot to introduce myself, and this is Wade Burleson to my right. We are thankful each and every week to have a dialogue and answer the many questions that you have. I also want to invite you, could you send in your questions to this email, wabequestions with an S at the end, @gmail.com. Again, that's wabequestions@gmail.com. Now, Wade, I'm going to throw out this next question. The first two questions have been maybe a little bit apologetic, which I would say maybe every question can be considered apologetic, but this question really stuck out to me. And here's the question. This is the first time Wade is hearing the question. And this person asked this: why do we need atonement, and why is it a blood sacrifice? So again, why do we need atonement, and why is it a blood sacrifice? We're going to answer that here in a few seconds. Okay, Wade, there we go. Why do we need atonement, and why is it a blood sacrifice? People who aren't used to Christianity really might be interested in this question.
Well, first of all, let's talk about what atonement is.
Yeah.
Because many, even Christians, followers of Jesus, don't understand that word.
Yeah.
It's a word that was coined in English by one of the early Bible translators. His name is John Wycliffe. And he came to a Greek word and a Hebrew word that he really couldn't find a parallel in English for.
Okay.
So he invented the word atonement. He created it.
Wow.
And here's what the word means.
Okay.
In English, it's 3 words that are brought together to form one word. At one moment.
Atonement. At one moment. That's cool.
Atonement.
Yeah.
And at one moment. So the idea here is, let's say you and your wife are having an argument.
Yeah.
Okay? And you're kissing and making up. Okay? You're reconciling.
Yeah.
Okay, that kiss, that embrace, that is an at one moment. 2 people who previously were divided, separated, are now reconciled.
Wow.
That's the word atonement.
Okay, so I love that. At one moment, I never heard that, and that's why, Wade, I think people really enjoy your historical mind. You know, when I think about atonement, at one moment, we are reconciled to God, we're forgiven. Why do we need atonement? That was the first part of the question. I would say, first, because we're sinners. The Bible says clearly we've all sinned against God, Romans 3. We've all missed the mark, no matter who you are. And the second reason I believe we need atonement is because God is holy. I think it's really hard for us, myself, to really understand a God who is completely holy, set apart from us, that we can't even come into His presence and live, Scriptures teach. So God's holiness and our sin leads us to the obvious conclusion: we need to be reconciled. We need to be forgiven. And that is what I think leads to the second part of the question, which is, why do we need a blood sacrifice? Or why is it a blood sacrifice?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I think sometimes we have a tendency growing up in church, when we hear the word blood, we think of the red liquid,
Yeah.
okay? But I think it's missing the point. Blood is a symbol of life. In fact, Leviticus says life is in the blood. So one of the dietary restrictions for ancient Jews involved not eating meat with blood. And the idea there is, in blood you have life.
Wow.
So why the shedding of blood? Well, just substitute the word life. Life for life. So here's what I'm
So
saying.
it's not so much blood as much as it represents the life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
when the blood ceases to circulate, life ends. When blood is shed, life is over.
Wow.
When you bleed out, you die.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, Abe, sometimes we get so focused on the word blood that we lose sight of the fact that it's life. So the question is, why a blood sacrifice? And the answer is life for life. One person died, Jesus Christ, that another person, Abe Wright, might live. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's what I would say. When man ran from God, the wages of that running is death. We die.
Romans 6:23.
Correct.
Yeah.
So God, in his love for runners from him, sinners, runners,
Yeah.
because we're the ones running, right?
Yeah.
Gave us his Son, life for life. For without the shedding of blood, without the loss of life, there can be no forgiveness of sins. So the way I like to say it, Abe, is God loved us so much, he gave us his Son, who, through his life and death, bore the consequences of our running from God, so that when you put your faith in Jesus, you receive the life that Adam lost. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is life eternal through Jesus Christ our Lord.
You know, Wade, I want to give a few thoughts. I don't want to chase too many rabbit trails, but you said that Leviticus, I believe it's chapter 17, verse 11 says, the life of the flesh or the body is in our blood. Now help me out, because at one point, this was written, what, would you say 3,000 years ago? Moses wrote it-ish?
Yeah.
Now, back then, how did they know that the life of our body is in the blood? Because I heard George Washington died because it was known that when people were sick, they would cut you and try to bleed you out, only later to find in recent history that the life of our body is actually in our blood. So now we get blood transfusion. That's what it's called, right?
Right, correct.
But that just to me shows how incredible the Bible is. I want people to think about that. Something that was written, I don't know, 3,000 or so years ago, that modern science has discovered that what Moses wrote in Leviticus 17:11 is true, that the life of our body or our flesh is in our blood. And and George Washington and people like that used to actually try to bleed out to get rid of a sickness, and now we're realizing, no, we need blood. So that to me, it shows how powerful the Bible is. And I'll also say this, why atonement? Why a blood sacrifice? Because that's how God set it up. Now, I learned this in seminary. I don't remember the exact word, but the idea is, can God do anything? That was a big question. I lean towards, obviously, yes, but can he make a square circle? Some say no. I would probably say yes, he can. But I'm still open. But I realize when it comes to why atonement, why a blood sacrifice, why giving of his Son, because that's how God established it. And could God have gone about it any other way? For example, if we would have sinned, could God have said, hey, in order to be forgiven, I just want you to give me a big smile and wave, and that's going to wipe away your sins? I think he could have done that. But God, in His sovereignty, He knows everything. That's how He established it. My people need to be reconciled. I'm holy. And I think it all sets up to, you said it in the first podcast, Jesus receives that much more glory when we see Him dying. And it makes no sense to someone who's not a Christian at times to think God died on a cross and gave up His life. So I think maybe all of this was pointing to the climax of Christianity when God would send His Son to die. And therefore we are more inclined to worship and just be in awe that God would do something like that for us.
Yeah, I agree.
So why atonement? Why blood sacrifice? I just think that's how God wanted to establish it. And maybe this points to His Son receiving more glory from us.
Yes. You know, I read history.
Yeah.
And modern anthropologists, people who study the history of man, say that religions throughout human history have always had blood sacrifice. And so they say, oh, those are just, pagan, illiterate, uneducated cavemen, who think to appease a god you need to kill an animal. But I disagree. I believe from the beginning man was extremely literate. Try to build the pyramids today without any machines. They did it back then.
Wow.
Okay, so we're devolving, if you will, because of sin. But what happened from the beginning is God said, I'm going to give you a Redeemer. I'm going to give you a Messiah, one who will rescue you from death. And all the pagan religions, if you will, all of the blood sacrifice in the different religions of the world are a corruption of the truth that basically goes like this. Because of your sin, I deserve death. But God, in His love for sinners like us, has come Himself to die in our place. Emmanuel, God with us. And a great exchange occurs when you come to faith in Jesus Christ. Your sin and the consequences of it, death, were placed upon Jesus at the cross of Calvary. And His righteousness and His life is credited to you through this great transaction of faith. So that, as Colossians 1 verse 12 says, He, God, has qualified us to the inheritance of the saints in light. It's something God has done for us through Christ.
Wow. So the gospel is bloody. It's a sacrificial atonement where God reconciled humanity to Himself at one moment through His Son, and Jesus gave up His life. So why do we need atonement, and why is there a blood sacrifice? Well, we need atonement, which I'm glad you pointed this out. At one moment, we can be reconciled, brought back together to God. And we need this because we've sinned and God is holy. And I'm so thankful He provided a sacrifice. So why is it a blood sacrifice? You pointed it out. It's not so much the blood as it is the life, because the life of the body is in the blood. That is our life. We take out our blood, we stop living. And so it's more of Jesus giving His life. He didn't just give a few drops of blood. No, He died.
Yeah, in fact, I'll close with this, because we're out of time. Here's why is it so bloody? Why is the sacrifice, the atonement, so bloody? Here's what I would say. It's about death and life. And if you're separated from God, you're dead. You may not be physically dead, but you're dead emotionally. You're dead spiritually. So come to Jesus, and you receive life. So life for life. Receive the life of Christ and live.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for tuning in again. I want to remind you, send in your questions to wabequestions@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Look forward to answering and dialoguing with your questions next time.